Have you ever noticed that sometimes the smartest, most thoughtful, most self aware people are the ones who trust themselves the least or who doubt themselves the most? I was talking to a client this morning and what he shared literally stopped me in my tracks, right? He's highly educated, successful, international background. He's lived and worked in multiple countries for most of his life, and he's excellent at what he does. And yet he was sitting there questioning himself, and not because he'd failed at anything, and not because he lacked experience. And it certainly wasn't because he wasn't capable, because he's so competent and he's just amazing. But he kept receiving messages from people around him that he wasn't seeing things clearly, or seeing things correctly, rather. That he was missing something, and that somehow his perspective wasn't quite right, according to what they were saying. And as we talked, I realized something. This isn't actually just about him. And it wasn't really about culture either. It's something that I see all the time in my work. People slowly learn to distrust themselves because their experience internally doesn't match the dominant story around them. Whatever that dominance is, whether it's a religion, even a family stance, or a culture, there's something that's happening out there that is different than what they're feeling inside. And once that happens and they begin to ask the question, what's wrong with me? Things start going way south. And you have these amazing human beings who live their lives doubting how amazing they are. That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, I'm Leeza Steindorf. I'm an international leadership coach and human behavior specialist, and I help people understand themselves more deeply, align their values with how they live and work, and build stronger relationships, especially with themselves. And today I want to talk about why is it that so many people stop trusting themselves, if they even were trusting themselves to begin with? Because I don't think it happens by accident. I think it happens incrementally, just like one little bit at a time, starting from when we're really, really young. So maybe you grew up in a family that saw the world one way, and then you entered into a community that saw it very differently. Yeah? Or maybe your parents came from different cultures, as did mine. Or you were raised in a religion that didn't match the larger society around you. Maybe you've lived overseas, as have I, and spent time in different cultures that have nothing to do with your own history and your own culture. Or maybe you're part of a subgroup that doesn't quite fit in the dominant culture that's around you. Maybe you've always been the person, even if all of those factors aren't the case, maybe you're always the person who sees things differently than everyone else. So whatever the reason is, whatever the rub is, the discrepancy, you've probably had those moments where you've looked around and thought, wow, everybody seems to get this, but I don't. Or everyone else seems to agree. Or why don't I see it that way? Or why can't I see it that way? And if that happens enough times, there's a subtle shift that changes. You start moving your attention, your orientation from inside of yourself to outside. Well, they must be right. Why don't I get what they're saying? How come that's the way it is over there and it's not that way over here? And instead of trusting your own experience, you start monitoring yourself through other people's eyes. You start viewing yourself and your walk in the world through how you think other people are perceiving or how you think other people are living their lives. And you begin treating their reality as more valid than your own. And it's not because they're right, and it's not because you're wrong, but because there are more of them. I mean, there's one of you, but there's millions of those other people. And that's where self-trust begins to erode. That's what I've seen again and again. So I want to be clear, that doesn't mean that we're always right about everything. That's not what I'm talking about. Of course we're not. We all have blind spots and we misunderstand things or make mistakes, whatever. Yeah, I mean, when feedback comes in, and on this very point, when feedback comes in, I listen to it and I ask myself, what's mine in this? What can I improve here? What was my responsibility, and what's not mine? What's theirs or what's out there? So feedback and self-abandonment are not the same thing. when feedback comes in, I don't leave myself. I don't abandon myself. Listening to another person's perspective is healthy. It's useful. It's how we grow, right? It's how we can see things about ourselves that maybe that we can't see, but other people do see, right? So assuming your perspective has no value simply because it's different from everybody else's, that's not useful. And that's actually what we often do. And that's the distinction. So my client was noticing genuine differences between how he interprets situations and how some of his colleagues interpret them. And it makes sense. He has spent most of his life overseas. He's from a different culture. He's bilingual. He has this expanded worldview, expanded experience than anybody who's in just one culture. It doesn't matter what culture you're in. If you're monoculture, you have a different experience than if you're multicultural. And because those differences keep showing up for him again and again, he started wondering whether he should trust himself at all, because there was a difference, and there was a difference, and there was a difference, and there was a difference, right? But that's where then I asked him, what if the difference isn't proving that something's wrong? What if the evidence that you've had is simply a different experience? Because every single one of us lives inside of a different reality. And I'm not talking about the ultimate reality with a capital R. I'm talking about our own personal realities, our lived realities. Each one of them is individual. There's 7 billion people on the planet. And each person has had our own personal experience, our family, our education, culture. We've had our own wounds and losses, as well as successes and things that we are excited about, our dreams, things we're afraid of, the fears, our values, what we stand for, what we hope for and desire. Like, that's individual for every person, even people in the same family. Yeah. No two people have exactly the same combination. No two people ever. And yet we've somehow created this expectation that if enough people agree on something, then everybody else should automatically experience it the same way. I mean, we come together in groups, right? And we have commonalities, we have common goals, we create things, we work together, we live together. That's wonderful. But we don't suddenly become blended into this one glob. We still have all these beautiful differences. In fact, some of the most valuable perspectives come from people who are standing slightly outside of the norm. Look at art. Yeah, just art has contributed such amazing things to our world, and it's usually the people who have seen things very differently than the masses, right? The person who grew up somewhere else, or who sees a problem that nobody else has seen, or the person who keeps asking the question that other people are like, that's not a problem, that's not, and they don't give up because there's something there, yeah? Or somebody who notices that something's missing. You know, the what's that? The emperor's clothes, right? When finally the little kid, the naked emperor, is walking down the street, and everybody's, oh, what beautiful clothes, what beautiful clothes. And the little kid says, what are you talking about? The guy's naked. Yeah. Being able to speak your truth, that's not a defect. That is not something that's wrong with you. That's a contribution. That is adding another node to the symphony that wasn't quite complete without it. And that becomes incredibly important also in organizations or in families. Yeah. So leaders often say to me, but if everyone has a different perspective, how do we get everything done? Very simple. People already have different perspectives. If you believe that everybody on your team that you've given instructions to, or that you have created something together with, has the exact same perspective, you're fooling yourself. Of course there are different perspectives. That's the beauty of a team. So the question is whether we're willing to acknowledge those perspectives. A team isn't stronger because everyone thinks the same, just the opposite. A team is stronger because different people see different parts of a picture or of an experience that we've all agreed to walk into together. And the very same thing is true in relationships and in communities. And it's true in mediation, for example. One of my favorite moments in mediation is when people are working together and they're like, wait, what? That's how you see it? Are you kidding me? And then the other person says, Well, yeah, that's what I've been trying to say. You mean you don't see it that way? And then suddenly, both people realize that the conflict wasn't caused by bad intentions. It was caused by them having completely different experiences, different perspectives, if you will. And those two realities were colliding with each other, but they didn't even know it. They didn't even realize that they had these different perspectives because they assumed that everybody should or does have the same stance. And when they realize that, what happens is that curiosity blooms like a flower, and it replaces that, I know what's going on here, it replaces certainty. And when people understand each other, or they realize that understanding has been missing, then defenses drop and communication becomes possible again. It's amazing. So the goal is not to agree on everything. Agreement helps to move things forward, but the goal is to become interested in what someone else sees, including yourself. Because if you've spent years questioning your own perceptions and your own instincts or your own experience, not trusting what you're feeling and how you're seeing things or what you even want, I really would like to offer you something today. What if your differentness is not a problem to solve? What if it is information? I'm going to say beautiful information, but that's putting my spin on it. But what if your unique way of seeing the world and being in the world has value? What if the thing that you've been trying to correct is actually part of your contribution? Like who you are is the beauty. Not that there's something wrong with you, but the difference is what's important. And what if self-trust doesn't come from proving that you're right or proving that you can be like everybody else or trying to do that? But what if it comes from honoring your experience while you stay open to what other people are experiencing? It's so enriching because you get a juicy experience just walking through the world as yourself, and you end up opening doors because you're actually interested in what other people are experiencing. It's a very different way to live, and you don't have to abandon yourself. You don't have to convince anybody else of who you are and of your value. You can simply know that for yourself. You don't have to fit perfectly into every culture or group or organization or even a conversation. You can be you as different as you are and trust that how you are brings value. You simply have to be willing, I'm going to say, to stand in your own experience and remain curious about other people's. They don't have to be this perfect match in order for you to feel safe or in order for there to be stability. So that's what I offer you for the next week. Just notice when you automatically assume that someone else's perspective is more valid than your own, simply because more people have that perspective. That's it. And when you notice yourself doing that, just take a pause and ask yourself, what am I actually experiencing right now? What's going on for me inside? Not what you're supposed to experience, not what you're supposed to think, but what's present for you. And that's where self-trust begins. Because when you validate your own experience, that's one more step closer to valuing who you are. Okay? Try it out. Leave some comments below. I love to read them. And if this is useful to you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and you'll know when new clips come out. Thank you for being here. And until next time, be well.